Welcome to this session on risk management. This is submodule 1 of 4. In this session, we'll explore how risks are identified, analysed and controlled in well design and drilling operations. Let's begin by reviewing the learning objectives for this submodule. In this submodule, we will start by defining drilling risk and exploring how probability and severity interact to characterise potential outcomes. We will then examine how geological and geotechnical analysis is used to identify hazards such as shallow gas or poor pressure ramps before drilling begins. From there, we'll learn how to quantify risks using both qualitative descriptors like low, medium or high and numerical methods to assign meaningful values to probability and severity. We will also distinguish between hazards, which are conditions that may cause problems, and drilling events, which are the actual consequences that occur. Finally, we'll apply risk control frameworks that help us design safer wells, improve operational performance, and reduce exposure to both people and assets. Together, these objectives will provide a solid foundation for understanding and managing risk in drilling operations. Now, let's begin with an introduction to risk analysis. When we talk about risk analysis in drilling, we're really talking about a structured way of understanding uncertainty and preparing for it before and during operations. Risk analysis allows us to identify where hazards may exist, how they might evolve into events, and what the consequences could be. In drilling, the sources of risk are wide-ranging, from geological surprises to equipment failures, and each must be systematically evaluated. The main purpose of risk analysis is to transform uncertainty into manageable information. By quantifying probability and severity, engineers can make design and operational decisions that balance safety, cost, and performance. For example, we may use offset data to establish the likelihood of encountering abnormal pressure zones, or we may calculate the severity of a stuck pipe incident in terms of time lost and additional cost. Offset analysis is one of the most powerful tools we have when planning a new well. The term offset wells refers to those that are geographically closest to the proposed location, often drilled in similar geological settings. Studying their performance is an essential first step in the design process. By examining offset wells, we gain valuable insights into potential hazards, formation pressures, and drilling challenges that may occur in our upcoming well. This is a unique opportunity to learn from previous experience before making irreversible design decisions. For example, if nearby wells encountered severe wellbore instability at a certain depth, we can anticipate this and design casing or mud programs accordingly. A well-conducted offset analysis not only highlights risks, but also provides a reliable foundation for all subsequent risk evaluations. It shapes the basis of our probability and severity assessments by grounding them in real historical data. The quality of the analysis depends heavily on accuracy and how the findings are communicated. Clear, detailed reporting ensures that the knowledge is captured and applied effectively. Engineering risk analysis can be described as the science of evaluating risks, determining their probability, and assessing their potential consequences. In drilling, it provides a structured framework to move from uncertainty to quantifiable, actionable information. This discipline is sometimes referred to as syndinics, which is the systematic study of danger and risk. By applying syndinics to drilling, we shift from subjective judgment to a methodical process that incorporates probability distributions, severity scales, and decision frameworks. In practical terms, it allows us to say not only that a hazard exists, but also how likely it is to occur and how severe the consequences would be if it does. When we adopt engineering risk analysis, we enable better decision-making at every stage of well design and execution. It also ensures that risks are not just acknowledged, but formally documented, evaluated, and controlled through preventive or mitigative measures. A drilling hazard is defined as a condition, either known or potential, that can cause non-productive time or trigger an unexpected event. Unlike drilling risks, which we quantify, hazards are the raw conditions that exist in the subsurface or in the operational environment. Examples include shallow gas, which may lead to blowouts if not properly managed, wellbore instability that can cause stuck pipe, or poor pressure ramps that increase the risk of kicks and lost circulation. These conditions are most often identified through geological and geotechnical analysis before drilling begins. Seismic data, petrophysical logs, and geomechanical models all help us pinpoint zones that could represent hazards. In many cases, the first well in an area provides the baseline information to define these hazards. Subsequent wells then refine our understanding, improving the accuracy of risk assessments. The earlier hazards are identified, the more effectively we can mitigate them through design and planning. Once a hazard has been defined, it becomes a drilling risk when it is quantified in terms of probability and severity. Probability tells us how likely it is that the hazard will occur, and severity describes the potential consequences if it does. Together, they form the risk equation. Risk equals probability multiplied by severity. Probability can be expressed qualitatively using categories such as low, medium, or high, or quantitatively using percentages or statistical distributions. Severity is also scalable, ranging from light impacts, such as minor non-productive time, to catastrophic outcomes such as blowouts or total loss of the well. For example, if we identify a medium probability of wellbore instability in the Boulder Formation between 2,300 and 2,800 meters, with severe potential consequences, this represents a significant drilling risk requiring proactive management. Another case might be a low probability of a kick while drilling into the Lister Formation at 1,900 feet, but if the severity is major, it still warrants attention in the well design. This quantification process usually occurs during the design phase, ensuring hazards are assessed before operations begin. The key takeaway is that quantifying hazards converts uncertainty into defined, actionable risks. With this framework established, the next slide focuses on how those risks manifest into drilling events. A drilling event is the actual unplanned consequence of a drilling risk. In other words, when a hazard evolves into reality, it becomes an event. Events can also be classified as risks with a probability of 100% because they have already occurred. Examples of drilling events include stuck pipe, which might have a relatively low probability of happening, but very severe consequences when it does. Another example is a shallow gas blowout. This could have a high probability in certain formations and carries catastrophic consequences for safety, the environment, and costs. By categorizing events in this way, we maintain consistency in how we assess and document both potential and actual problems. This classification also enables us to evaluate whether our risk management measures were effective or if they need to be strengthened. The important point here is that events are the real-world outcomes of hazards and risks. Understanding them is essential for building feedback loops that improve future risk analysis. With this in mind, the next slide explains why monitoring risks and events is critical for both immediate operations and long-term well design improvement. Monitoring risks and events is vital because it allows us to prepare, respond, and learn from what happens during drilling. Let's break it down into two categories: hazards and risks, and then events. For hazards and risks, the goal is to incorporate them into the well design. By identifying risks early, we can develop mitigation plans, such as selecting appropriate casing depths or adjusting mud weights. We can also create contingency plans to ensure we know exactly what to do if the hazard materializes. Documenting risks before drilling defines expected operations, as well as time and cost implications, giving the project team a realistic baseline. For events, continuous monitoring during operations is key. Tracking problems as they occur allows for quick resolution through management of change processes. Just as important, recording these events provides feedback that strengthens the design of future wells. Without this loop, the same mistakes would repeat across projects. The overall benefit of monitoring is that it shifts us from reactive problem solving to proactive risk control. This transition improves safety, reduces non-productive time, and enhances efficiency. The next slide introduces how the industry has moved towards a full risk control environment, following similar paths as quality and health and safety management. Risk management in drilling has evolved in much the same way as quality management and health and safety. Early on, the industry tended to focus on reacting to problems only after they occurred. Today, the expectation is that we anticipate, control, and continuously improve how we manage risks. A risk control environment is more than just identifying hazards. It's about embedding proactive practices into the entire life cycle of well design and operations. This means risks are documented, formally assessed, and addressed with structured mitigation plans. It also involves a culture where risk awareness is part of everyday decision-making, from planning through to execution. The evolution toward risk control ensures that we no longer treat risks as isolated or unavoidable incidents. Instead, they are systematically managed, just as we do with safety and quality standards. Here we illustrate the progression of HSE risk management practices in the oil and gas industry, starting from very basic record keeping on the left through to comprehensive risk control on the right. Let's walk through each stage step by step. We begin with paper records of catastrophics only. In this earlier stage, only the most serious accidents, such as blowouts or fatalities, were recorded. Minor incidents or near misses were ignored, meaning valuable lessons were lost. Next, we move to many stop cards with no follow-up. Here, employees were encouraged to report unsafe acts or conditions, but the system lacked accountability. Hazards were identified, but without structured follow-up, little actually changed. The next phase was comprehensive paper, or e-database, with reactive follow-up. Companies started recording a wider range of incidents into formal systems. However, the approach remained reactive. Problems were addressed only after they occurred, not prevented. As systems matured, we entered the stage of data reports, monthly by location. Here, data was compiled into regular summaries at site or district level. This gave management visibility, but insights were still limited. The following step introduced analysis reports of trends and categories. This marked a real improvement, as recurring issues could now be identified and prioritized. For example, repeated well control incidents or equipment failures were tracked systematically. Building on this, the industry embraced proactive hazard and risk analysis. Tools like risk matrices and bowtie analysis allowed risks to be anticipated and mitigated before drilling began. This was strengthened further with critical task inventories, ensuring that high-risk activities, such as pressure testing or well control drills, received targeted controls. Finally, we reach best practices, where risk control is embedded across the organization, driving continuous improvement. This represents the stage of total risk control, where safety performance becomes a source of both wisdom and sustainable value. Let's take a moment to review the objectives we set out at the beginning of this sub-module and reflect on how we've addressed each one. First, we defined drilling risk in terms of its probability-severity relationship. We explored how hazards become risks once quantified and how probability multiplied by severity provides a clear framework for assessment. Second, we identified hazards from geological and geotechnical analysis. Using examples like shallow gas and poor pressure ramps, we showed how subsurface data highlights potential problem zones. Third, we discussed how risks are quantified through probability and severity evaluation. We looked at both qualitative and numerical approaches and worked through examples of medium probability instability or low probability kicks with major consequences. Fourth, we distinguished drilling events from hazards, emphasizing that events are the realized consequences of risks. By classifying events, we strengthened feedback loops for future well design. Finally, we applied risk control frameworks, tracing the industry's evolution from reactive record keeping to proactive structured risk management systems. We also examined how the risk matrix visualizes tolerable versus intolerable conditions. Together, these objectives demonstrate that effective risk management is a continuous cycle of identification, quantification, monitoring, and improvement. With our review complete, let's now close this submodule. This concludes submodule 1 of 4 on risk management. Please proceed to the quiz to test your understanding of the key concepts we've covered. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to continuing with you in the next submodule.